Hey guys, I'm just waiting for Nun Nun. Hi.
Hello.
Well, we were a little late, but that's not like 5 minutes, so that's fine with me. Nobody was here anyway.
I don't think we've ever been on time.
Not really. I try to be.
Life happens.
Yeah, well, when I said I was ready for 7:45, I was until my son walked in the door with his girlfriend. Um, and so I ended up talking to them for a bit, and then I had to grab my drink. Then I had to plug the mouse in, and I'm just like, okay, maybe I will be a little late. Hey,
How you,
Sally.
how are you feeling?
Um, my stomach's still weird. I don't know. I don't know what I'm eating or what I'm doing to make it like that. I don't know, I feel, like, tired and lazy, and I just don't wanna do anything. Like,
I
I
get
should be
that.
sick, but I'm not. I don't know how to describe it. Just I don't know, like, I do the most minuscule thing, and then I get lightheaded and hot flashes, and it's like, "Oh my god, can I just be, like, normal for one day?"
Have you had your thyroid checked?
Yeah, I have. Hey, Zuna. Um, he said it was fine. I
Actually,
know I have high blood pressure, and I'm medicated for that, but I'm wondering if maybe
there's
I should
actually
get the dosage upped.
two
Hmm?
things. When you get your thyroid checked, you should get them checked in the morning. There's a specific time, like between 10 a.m. and before noon.
Yeah,
And um, the other thing is get your cortisol level checked.
I'm just
And
so,
it
like,
might have
meh.
something to do with that, like with the just the symptoms you're saying you have.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I was always on the go. I always wanna be out and do something and anything, whatever, and then now it's just I sit in a freaking house.
I would pay $1 million to have even a tenth of the energy I had before I got injured.
Yeah, like, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you got caught up, Zena? Hey, country girl Brenda. You're like that all the time. No forward, so toward the evening, I get tired as it wears off. Oh, wow.
My
Wow, there's so
sister,
many like, I'm on so much medication because I have so many different problems, right?
that's
Like,
what I am
even more
too.
now?
My sister's worried because she hasn't had to buy groceries now for 2 weeks. She's like, "Are you gonna ever eat again?" I'm like, yeah, sometime.
And you go Monday, right?
Yeah, I go Monday in person, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, hopefully everything gets figured out.
Yeah, I really don't want to go back on a feeding tube, which sucks. So
Yeah. Well, I know my B12 sucks, like, it's always not right. So I do take vitamins. I do take B12 supplements, but I used to get the needle, and that's more I found was more efficient. But the thing is, I have to go, in half an hour away from me, go see my doctor to get it done. But then someone told me that I could do it myself. So I don't know. I should probably inquire about that. I have to see him, I think next week, anyways.
do you have a
Yeah.
vitamin D deficiency too?
I don't know. I know I do with the B12.
Because I
I
have
just take vitamins.
B12, vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin K, vitamin
And
E,
iron.
iron, potassium, um, magnesium.
Holy cow.
Like I just
You
had
take it?
to have my yearly, I don't know what you would call it, report for my total care that I get from through the state. And
Hmm.
she asked for like all the medications, and I'm like, 9 times out of 10 these people have no way to spell them, like, so I'm just like, okay. So I start spelling them. She's like, well, what's that? And I'm like, yeah, you're not gonna know any of these names, so I'm just
Yeah.
gonna spell them for you. And she's like, we got like, I don't know, 10 in, and she's like, is there more? I'm like, oh, I got 32. I'm like, we're just starting. And
I
she's
know,
like,
I hate when they
oh,
ask for what medications you're on because then you have to remember like, I remember when I'm on and what they're called, but it's like the milligram dosage,
yeah.
it's like and then you have to remember every single one. I have a whole drawer full.
I used to do the B12 injections too, and then I couldn't do them because when I had the feeding tube, something caused, because I had a stomach feeding tube, so it interacted or something and caused
Yeah.
some kind of action because that's where I had to stick the um, injections and
Needle?
stuff. So, yeah. So then they went back to giving me pills, and I haven't been on the injections now for since 2019. So I wonder if I should go back on them.
Maybe. That's all I do is just take vitamins. I can't but the thing is I don't really know if it's doing anything. That's all I do is take like I take vitamin D and then I take vitamin B12. Um,
Well,
they're not good with sun.
my vitamin D is were twofold because of my immune system, but also because I don't ever go outside, so I don't ever get the sun. The only time I
So
get outside is just to go to the doctor. So
that
it's
same,
like
that'll probably be the next time I go out, and that's ridiculous. There's no reason why I can't go outside. Hey, Benita.
I would go outside. It's just that there's no way for me to get outside. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd have to have help, and my sister works two full-time jobs, and so does her husband works, and it's like there's just no here. You know.
Yeah, no, I hear ya. All right, I'm gonna start. So this one is titled "In California, Everybody Has a Tan." Vitamin D needs magnesium and vitamin K2, MK7. But holy hell, I'm gonna talk to my doctor just because just let him know I'm just like down. Then again, this time of year I do get kind of depressed, but not now. Now I'm fine, but it's more January, February, March. That's when I'm just like, oh my God, I need to go outside. Oh, I can
Seasonal
have all of
depression is big.
Yeah, I have it.
So do I.
That's what I'm wondering if mine's absorbing it too. And I don't drink milk. I can't stand milk.
I can't have
I
milk
take vitamin
anymore.
C. I just don't like the taste.
I loved milk when I was a kid, but I can't have it now.
Yeah. Boron too.
But I can't have any vegetables or anything either. So,
Oh my gosh.
like when the lady was asking me, she's just like, "Do you eat a healthy, balanced diet?" I'm like, "Lady, there's so much I can't eat. Let me just tell you what I can.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there."
Yeah, it'll be shorter list. You put cocoa in your milk? Maybe I should try that. At least it's something. Because I hate taking the calcium pills. Oh my God, they smell like fish. Ugh.
And they're big. They're not small pills.
Very. Yeah, they're quite big. All right. So in California, everybody has a tan. I found it difficult to sort through the stories coming out of the house on Cielo Drive. Picture a spiderweb so dense with connections and tendrils that it looks like a solid sheet of fabric. That's what I thought I was working with. The Hollywood cliques. That had seemed at the start to discreet, and I can't even talk. At the start, so discreet and isolated, were all mixed up with one another, much more than Bugliosi had made it appear. Plus, then and now, people weren't always willing to be upfront about who they hung out with. Tate was right to be wary of Frykowski. Assuming she had been, he'd fallen in with a dangerous crowd. Many of the primitive people of Kazanowski met had extensive rap sheets, and their names kept coming up when people mentioned the gravest excesses of Cielo Drive. Pick Dawson, who threatened Frykowski's life and been thrown out of Polanski's party, had been the subject of Interpol surveillance for drug smuggling as early as 1965. The young son of a diplomat had gained entry into the Polanski crowd through his friendship with Cass Elliot, one of the singers in the popular 60s group The Mamas and the Papas. Like most of the men in the troubled singer's life, he'd used her for her money and connections. Elliot's biographers would later write that her infamous 1966 London arrest, she'd been caught stealing hotel towels and keys, was actually a ruse to force her to share information about Dawson's drug smuggling operations. Dawson's colleagues in the drug business, Billy Dole, Tom Harrigan, also wormed their way into Polanski's circle through Mama Cass. Okay, I did not know that. According to police reports, Dawson, Doyle, and Harrigan, all 27 and all romantically involved with Elliot, were joined by a fourth partner, Uncle Charles Tacot, a New Yorker who was more than a decade older. A former Marine, the 6'6" strongman was renowned for his prowess with knives. He was rumored to have maintained ties to the military intelligence, and he'd been selling drugs in Los Angeles since his arrival in the mid 1950s. Curiously, despite their many years of drug peddling and several drug arrests among them, only Doyle had ever been convicted of any crime, and his conviction was later overturned and changed to an acquittal on his record. Like Charles Manson, the four men seemed to have little fear of law enforcement. Helter Skelter paid only passing attention to these guys. They were among the few in the book who were given pseudonyms. Although Bugliosi noted Pick Dawson's death was against Frykowski, he admitted an even more disturbing incident, one that makes the revenge motive much more plausible, and that reveals the extent to which the victims were mixed up in the seamier side of the counterculture. As the story goes, at some point in the months before the murders, the residents of Cielo threw one of their endless parties, with Frykowski and Sebring leading the charge. Billy Doyle showed up, and in the spirit of time, drank, smoked, and snored himself to unconsciousness. Frykowski and Sebring, and maybe Witold Kalinowski too, wanted to get even with Doyle for something. Some say he'd sold them bad drugs. So before a crowd of onlookers, they lowered Doyle's pants, flogged him, oh my God, and anally art him. Wow. This has become the kind of apraxia that Manson conspiracy theorists can't get enough of. It's the same incident referenced by Barney Hoskins, Waiting for the Sun, the book I showed Bugliosi that day after our lunch. The story feels almost mythological in its ugliness and in the extent to which its most basic details who, what, when, where, why are in flux. Candace Bergen, in an interview with LAPD a few weeks after the murder, said that it was an arm, most likely at Sebring's place or at his friend John Phillips, also of the Mama and the Papas. Dennis Hopper told the Los Angeles Free Press that it was at Cielo House. He described it as a mass whipping of a dealer from Sunset Strip who'd given them bad dope. Ed Sanders, the family, reporters that Doyle was whipped and video buggered. And the location varies depending on which edition of the book you're looking at. I already read it, Zuna. It's on my YouTube channel. It's in a playlist. I read the whole thing. I read that last year. And then I was shown this one, and I'm glad I was by Nun Nun because I actually like this one better. It's not so full of shit.
It's not just one person's account. I mean, he interviewed, I don't know,
Yeah.
hundreds of people.
And there's stuff in here I never even knew that happened. So what really happened? I hesitated to report on this in 1999. It felt like another lurid departure from Manson. And it's not as if my deadline afforded me time to explore every strange byway, but it bothered me that Bugliosi had left this out, and that so many people close to the victims regarded it as a flashpoint in the case. Shh. Was Jack, I'm not even talking about her. Hey, Teresa. Jack. Shh. Oh, there's somebody here.
Is
I
someone at
hate
your
when people
house?
come to my house at night. I don't know. Sounds like I just heard a car door, but it could be across the street.
Is he like your alert dog?
Yes. For everything. Ghosts, people,
What,
KJ,
what kind of dog is he?
a Shih Tzu.
Oh my.
Sounds like an old man.
Sounds like a big old dog.
He definitely is not. He's a little shit. So it was another insistence, no, instance of the resilience of the live freaky, die freaky mindset. Plus, even if Pick Dawson, Billy Doyle, and the other dealers hadn't murdered anyone, they could still be behind the crimes, so or adjacent to them. If I could connect them to Manson, for instance, couldn't they have contracted him for the murders? And if they were selling a lot of drugs to anyone who died up at the Tate household, might there have been some kind of cover up at work? So down I went. Yeah, I didn't even think about anything like that because I didn't know about it because Bugliosi kept it out of the damn book. So
Well,
here's
yeah,
another missed opportunity.
well, he kind of painted it to be all his theory. I mean, from jump to end, you know. So there was no space for speculation on anybody to. We just kind of like took it as gospel and said, yeah, okay, that's true. That's what happened.
Yeah,
And because it was such a horrendous thing, it's kind of like that thing when someone reports a crime against a woman and you don't want to disbelieve her because it's a woman, you know? So it's kind of like the same thing. They
yeah,
were murdered, so we don't want to like go against and say anything bad about the people. So for Tom O'Neill, I think, to go and dig all this up, he had like death threats and everything, you know, like to him, his family, and everything for over 20 years. But
yeah.
it was just so inquisitive to the point that he saw so many inconsistencies, he wanted to keep going.
I don't blame him. Glad he did because I barely touched the surface of this book and I'm learning so much more than I ever knew. There's a lot of disgusting R's happening. I mean, that
Yeah,
I did not know about.
and with the drug culture back in the 60s, a lot of that happened a lot. Like there was a lot of, you know, orgies and sex parties. It was like big at the time.
Yeah,
But for Bugliosi just to one give pseudonyms to the ones that were involved is kind of sketchy, and for
yeah.
two to do just barely even cover any of the incidents when it could all come into one actual crime that happened because of all these other events is kind of sketchy.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm thinking. Like, so he says at the end of this, he's like, and like, if they were selling a lot of drugs to anyone who died at the Tate household, might there have been been some kind of a cover up at work? So down I went, and apparently here we go. So thanks to Kazganowski and a few others who spoke with the LAPD, detectives were quickly suspicious of Doyle and his companions after the murders. And Doyle himself was getting around quite a bit at the time. He was back and forth between Los Angeles, Jamaica, and his native Toronto. Oh, we have a Canadian. Really? It was in this last city that police caught up to him in late August. I wouldn't get a transcript of the LAPD's interview until many years into my investigation, but it's worth including here because it gives his side of the story. And Doyle is quotable. There's something almost partially hard boiled about him. In short, he told the LAPD's Lieutenant Earl Deemer that he didn't remember being Ard, but he couldn't be sure. It might have happened anyway. He recalled going over to Frykowski's at the Cielo House on the night in question, sometime in early July. That's weird how they're calling it Frykowski's house because it's not his house. It's ISD. Like I think from what I remember, what I've seen, like basically those people that were there, Frykowski and like even Jay Sebring and the other cop Folger, it's like they
Took
were there
over
before even Sharon was, and,
with Melter. Melter was the original owner, so
yeah, yeah. It's weird.
like they were too comfortable in a place that they should have been not known to.
Yeah, it's not their house, and the way they're having all these parties and doing all these things, like, are you kidding? Wow.
Because I don't know if I was overseas acting or doing a job and I found out someone was inhabiting my house throwing parties like
And
this, I'd
yeah,
be kind of pissed.
especially with my pregnant wife. Like,
Yeah. Because if you read Helter Skelter, the way it reads in his book, it was,
that they were all nice.
yeah, they were all, you know, upstanding
They're all
citizens.
best friends.
There you go, best friends.
They were all best friends and nice. They loved each other, and it was horrific. I don't know. This is messed up. He recalled going over to see Frykowski at the Cielo house on the night in question, sometime in early July. Frykowski, thinking it would be a funny prank, slipped some mescaline in his champagne. I don't know what that is. Folger and Kazganowski were there too. It was out at the swimming pool, Doyle told Deemer, and there was 2 cases of champagne by the pool. And apparently Frykowski put some in my drink, and I said, Jesus, I am high. I am really out of my bird. He wanted something to bring him down, and Frykowski was happy to oblige, producing some pills that he said belonged to Sharon Tate. What? Doyle swallowed about 8 of them. And soon enough, as Frykowski started to laugh at him, he realized that the pills were something else entirely and that he was dealing with some wild people. That's scary. They were crazier than hell. I didn't realize they were so crazy. I am using the word crazy. I mean, drug-induced crazy. In California, everybody has a tan. Now, if people don't have a tan, they look a little different. You can see things in their faces that a tan covers up. They were all tan and looked healthy. They looked very straight to me when I first got there, and I don't remember much more than that. So not only did they drug him and drug him again, they ard him and
Yep.
flogged him, apparently.
So put on a
His
happy
observation
face.
of
You put
what?
on like a happy face and a facade to give him like
Yeah.
a sense of, safeness, and then turned around and then did that to him.
That is horrific. His observation about California, where everybody has a tan, reminded me of Kazganowski's remark. It was possible back then to separate geniuses from charlatans. Everyone blended in. Of course, by most reckonings, Doyle himself would count as one of the charlatans. He admitted that he was a naturally paranoid person. In recent months, he developed a coke habit, which only exacerbated the paranoia. Convinced that someone somewhere was out to get him, he started carrying a gun. I kind of can't blame him. It didn't help that he often bragged about how much cocaine he had, especially when there were women around. They all wanted to get laid, he said to Deemer, and the price of admission was a nose full of coke. And I learned that he would show up at parties with a silver coke spoon and tell everyone he had pounds of it. His good friend Charles Tarcott said, "For Christ's sakes, Billy, what did you tell people that kind of stuff for?" And I said, "I want to get laid, Charles." That day, higher and higher on drugs that he couldn't even name, Doyle became convinced that Frykowski meant to harm him. So he pulled out his gun and pointed it at the pole, threatening to kill Frykowski. Frykowski, the bigger man and the more sober, too, if only by a hair, wrestled the gun from him. Here Doyle's memory got hazy. He apparently lapsed into unconsciousness, and Wojciech called up Charlie Tokot, asking him to come over and collect his deranged friend. It was possible Doyle conceded that Rakowski and Kazganowski had ard him after that. He admitted that he might have told his friend Mamakas something that to that effect. I was unconscious, he told Deemer. I wasn't sore the next day, not there, but I was sore everywhere else. In another LAPD officer's account of that interview, Doyle puts it even more frankly. I was so freaked out on drugs, I wouldn't know if they fucked me or not. Gosh. It took a lot of asking around, but eventually I tracked down both Billy Doyle and Charles Talcott. As for the other two, I'd learned Dawson had died of a drug overdose in 1986, and Harrigan was nowhere to be found. Neither had given an interview before, and though they could be cagey, they were also eager to relive their underworld glories. Both were old men now. They were still operators, who acted as if they were at the height of their criminal powers. Impressively foul-mouthed, both of them threatened to have me killed at various points in our interviews, although I didn't take either seriously. In our first phone call, Tacot filled in some of the blanks from Doyle's story. He remembered driving over to pick up Doyle, who was passed out somewhere on Cielo Drive property. His belt had been split, apparently with a knife. A friend who'd come along for the errand said, I think Wojciech fucked him. They took Doyle, still unconscious, to Mama Cass's place in the Hollywood Hills. Tacot remembered thinking, if we don't take care of him, he's going to go back there and I have a beef. I carried him out, laid him by a tree, went back to my car, and got about 20 feet of wielded link chain, which
This
I
is
had in there for somebody else.
this is
Pardon?
bizarre. I don't know how they could
Yeah.
think this was even what you're gonna read. How they could even think that this would be okay, but it's
Yeah.
bizarre.
So I got 20 feet of wielded link chain, which I had in there for somebody else originally. I put it around his ankle and a tree with a good padlock and snapped it all together, so I know he's not going anywhere. Cass was in the hospital at the time. She said, get the Polaroid, get the Polaroid. This is somebody from Mamas and the Papas. Are you serious? This is gross.
Yeah.
And she wants a camera. Doyle came to a few hours later, still very high and simmering with rage. I'm going to shoot that motherfucker. Takot remembered him saying, and I said, no, we're leaving town. We're going to Jamaica. But first, you're going to get sober and you're going to be on this fucking tree until you are. I asked Takot, do you think Wojciech did fuck Billy? Yeah, that's what Billy was so pissed at him for. Takot said, Wojciech would have been killed if I hadn't intervened.
Like
Wow.
they couldn't have took him to a hotel, a house. They had to just leave him in the front yard of Mama Cass's with a tied to a tree with a padlock and a chain.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not my first go-to when someone's drunk and they need my assistance, but okay.
Wow. So Wojciech Krakowski would have been killed if it wasn't. Wow. Would Billy have hired killers? I asked, thinking of Manson. No, he would have taken all the pleasure himself. In his interview with the police, Doyle had allowed that he was furious at Krakowski and his set. When I was chained to the tree, he said, they were the object of my rage, which was unreasonable and unnatural rage. To calm him down, Doyle said, had chained a sign to the tree that said, "You are loved." Doyle was stuck there for more than a day. After that, Takot told me the pair headed off to Jamaica, where apparently they were making a movie about marijuana. No footage from this film has ever surfaced. Others have said that the two were involved in large narcotics deal. On August 9th, while they were away, Manson goes up and kills those people, and everyone's looking for Doyle. Takot said. He and Doyle were two suspects within days. I picked up the phone one day, and the Toronto Star informed me that me and Billy were in the headlines. Two wanted for murder, sorry. A couple of days later, back in the United States, I took a lie detector test, Turcotte told me. They knew I had nothing to do with it. Billy, too. He was in Jamaica with me. We were cleared out of the country. You can't kill anybody can't kill somebody long distance. True enough, but you could arrange for someone else to do the killing. Turcotte adamantly denied that he and Billy Doyle knew Manson. They never even met the guy. Nor, he said, had they sold drugs to anyone staying at the Tate House. We were consultants, he said. We'd tell them if it was okay or not. If the drugs were okay? Yeah, he added. Billy was fucking a whole bunch of broads up there. Did you ever hear about any orgies? I asked. If you want to consider Billy fucking the broads an orgy. Nice. Charlie Takot wasn't exactly the picture of virtue. I wanted to find other people who'd known him, who could say if he'd known Manson. It wasn't hard, seemingly enough. Everyone in town had partied with Takot at some point. Corinne Calvet, a French actress who'd worked in Hollywood since the 40s, and one of the most alarming stories of them all, Calvet was famous for her turbulent life as her film roles. She'd starred opposite James Cagney in What Price Glory. In the 50s, she married Johnny Fontaine, a mobster turned actor who'd been a pallbearer at gangster Mickey Cohen's funeral. Got some Black Dahlia people in here.
Mm-hmm.
Purported Satanist. Mickey Cohen was a purported Satanist. No, wait. Oh my gosh. Maureen was. Okay, so she married Johnny, a mobster turned actor, uh, who'd been a pallbearer at the gangster Mickey Cohen's funeral. A purported Satanist, she'd been sued in 1967 by a longtime lover who accused her of controlling him with voodoo. Was he successful? I met Calda at her beach-facing apartment in Santa Monica. Solemn and unsmiling in heavy makeup, her gray hair swept back, she got right to the point. The only thing that I can tell you about this Manson, she said, her accent inflecting the words with glamour and gravity, is that Charlie Taka brought him and the girls to a party at our house. 2 hours after they were there, I called Charlie Manson taking a piss in my, or I caught Charlie Manson taking a piss in my pool. I told Charlie Taka to get them out of here, and they left. After the tragedy happened, the FBI came by and told me I was next on their list to be killed. I didn't know that. Wow. When I expressed shock at this, her eyes narrowed. With genuine malice, she said, "Maybe you are new at this. When I tell you something, don't question it. I don't say it unless it's true." I explained that Chakot had denied ever having met Manson or anyone in the family. "Maybe he has a good reason to say that," Calvert said, letting her words hang in the air. She was certain Charlie knew them. I pressed her again. Was she sure that Chakot brought Manson and the girls to her party? Well, I would not put my hand on the fire saying that Charlie brought them over, but Charlie's knew them. I tried to get more out of Calvert, but the rest of the interview was frosty. When I asked her to specific dates or even years, she grew exasperated, throwing her hands up in disgust. "I do not know years. Do not ask me." Before long, she had had it with me altogether. "I want you to leave now," she said, and I did. Thinking I could eventually get Cot to let his guard down, I began to visit him at Santa Anita Convalescent Center in Temple City. His health was failing and he had trouble walking. I found him lying in a bed naked, a sheet pulled just above his groin. He was bald with a silver mustache, bony arms, and a gravelly voice. I noticed a fading tattoo on his forearm. On the wall, he'd hung a photo of his granddaughter at her senior prom. Later, when he rose to get exercise using a walker, I saw how tall he was, 6'6" and rail thin. Although his faculties were waning, he was sharp. He still commanded enough authority to boss around the short orderly who assisted him. Zakat shared his room with another patient, and he seemed to resent the enfeebling atmosphere of the place. "Too much groaning around here," he said, so I offered to drive into his favorite restaurant, Coco's, a California chain known for its pies. Taking him out to lunch was an elaborate procedure. People from the rest home wheeled him out to my car, lifted him in, and put the wheelchair in the trunk. Once we were at Coco's, however, I had to lift Taka into the wheelchair myself, an intimate maneuver for two near strangers. Humiliated, he began to threaten me, albeit ineffectually. "Do you realize who you're dealing with?" he rasped as I attempted to hoist him out of my passenger seat. "I could have you hurt or killed." How the high and mighty. "Hey, cool gamer." In Coco's, with food in front of him, he calmed down a bit, and soon we were having a free-wheeling of combative conversation about the murders in Hollywood in the 60s. Takot had lived in Los Angeles since the mid-1950s when he moved there from Mexico with his wife. He had two daughters, one of whom, Margot, would later confirm a lot of her father's story. He was a drug dealer, she said, who operated on the fringes of the music and acting world. Although he would often get arrested, she said, nothing ever stuck. Someone always took care of it for him. Takot continued to deny ever having known Manson, and he bridled at the insinuation that he had anything to do with the crimes. The Tate murders, he went on, led to the most fucked up investigation I've ever been in my life. He had sued the Los Angeles Times for announcing him as a suspect. Any effort to implicate him, he said, was probably just the LAPD covering up for their bad police work. As he grew more comfortable, Turcotte made an unexpected revelation. At the time of the murders, he worked for an intelligence agency, he wouldn't say which, and reported to Hank Fine, a veteran of the Army's military intelligence services. This had been a World War II era operation so secret that it wasn't even acknowledged by the federal government until 1972. Fine, a Polish mercenary whose true name was Hirsch Matthias Wazachachi, was an assassin who shot people for the government, Tarkot explained. Thinking the old guy was fascinating, I barely followed up on the revelation, but he and later Billy Doyle would often reference Fine only to refuse to answer any questions about him. When I looked into him, I learned neither man had been lying. Takot also described his friend Doyle. They were still close. As a dangerous man, he'd kill you in a fucking minute. "Both of us are second generation intelligence. Don't write this stuff," he implored me. "You'll get killed. These are very dangerous men. They will find you and they will kill you." That was a warning I heard a lot from various parties over the years. Takot reminded me that Bugliosi, when he wrote Helter Skelter, had given pseudonyms to him and his friends, and not just for the sake of politeness. He was afraid American intelligence would kill him if he exposed us, Takot had claimed. He added that Bugliosi was an asshole who never interviewed him or Billy. "Vincent Bugliosi knows to keep his mouth shut. I've got him killed. I didn't tell him that. Didn't have to." What? Wow. Oh, no worries. Hey, cool gamer. Hey, Goose. Every time for me too. I'm so sick of it. So stupid. Dad or Nini's, like anyone, anything that has to do with KJ. It's like we can't say anything. And I'm not saying the F words. I'm not like screaming all in caps. I don't know. Is it my emojis maybe? Too many emojis? Stupid.
I got a limited
I tried to,
comment on a video that was um, from the Dad Challenge podcast, and he was talking
yeah.
about Mrs. Fields cookies, and he was like, "I wish
Well, they're
every time I go to the States, I get them." And all I did was type in there, "You can get them online now. They'll ship them to Canada." And they came back and said they took away my comment for violating guidelines. I was like, "Mrs. Fields cookies?" I'm like,
yeah,
"Okay."
see what I mean? It's over. It's because I think it's because they're using bots. Like they're not doing this by themselves. Everything's robotic now.
All I was trying to do was tell him he could order them for to be shipped to Canada, so he didn't have to come into the States to get them. I'm like, my God.
Goose says, me too. I gave them the thumbs up and they said they're targeting me. Yeah, for bullying and harassment. Like, how many more times are we going to get blamed for something that we're not doing or hidden or we can't comment until like I lose my channel or you can't go on YouTube anymore? Like, this is fucked up. It needs to be fixed. Hey, Joe.
But yet they let what's her face get Sniper Wolf get off when she actually went to Jack's Film's house and doxed him on her 33 million.3 Instagram followers, and YouTube
Yeah,
did nothing
they don't care. It's like they pick and choose who they want to. I don't
because
even know. Like,
she has like 5 million followers here on YouTube. So they in their uh, guideline policy, it says even off platform can get result in your channel being terminated. Now they're going back on that and saying that we don't go off what you do offline or off platform isn't we don't really get involved. So they gave her a pause in her monetization. Like it's going to even affect her. She has 5 million on YouTube and 33 on Instagram. But yet she took a video. First she asked her followers, should I go to his house and talk to him? And then she went and took a video of the front of his house on Instagram.
oh my God.
And then when he called her out and called them out on Twitter and on YouTube, YouTube is like, well, we just put a monetary pause. I'm like, no, she should be off the platform.
Yeah, there's a lot of YouTubers that need to be off this fucking platform, but yeah, here they are.
And she steals people's content. When she goes on TikTok, takes a TikTok video, and you know how you're supposed to transform it and make your own, like make own commentary. She sits there, watches the whole TikTok, says about 2 words, and then she gets a million views on it, and
Oh
doesn't
God,
credit
yeah.
who made the video originally. So Jack was going back, reacting to her videos, reacting to other people's, and then crediting the original people so they could get the follows.
Yeah, that's not even allowed. We're not allowed to have that. A friend of mine ended up doing that using a TikTok video on YouTube platform and her channel got demonetized for like 3 months. She's still fighting for it, I believe. Because you're not supposed to, but yeah, people like that. I don't understand. I truly don't.
If they make
Sniper
YouTube
Wolf got
money,
34.1 million subscribers on YouTube. Wow.
it's crazy. But actually, she's getting sued by her ex-husband that she said was her boyfriend, and they're trying to get divorced. And actually, comes out in these court papers that he did all the gaming, and she just
Yeah,
pretended she was gaming. So he was doing all the work while she was just the face.
that's crazy. Yeah, Goose. But KJ can call whole Christians pedophiles and human traffickers, and she never gets paused and accuse people of being run over in cars. I mean, she's done so much illegal shit, even, and she's still here.
I don't know how people still follow her. I swear they all
I
have to
don't know
be
either.
bought. They have to
I
be
do like
bought.
the fact that she's getting called out every single day now. Every video she makes, every post that she makes, her fans are calling her out and they're leaving her ass. So it's like I know I said before, like people are starting to know like it's now it is. Like she's screwed up big time. Her fans are not happy with her. They're leaving by thousands. Like it's great, but yet she keeps buying them to keep that up to what
Yeah.
is she, 350 now or whatever on YouTube. It's disgusting. I tried to get Takot on the subject of Rakowski, who was, to my mind, the victim with the shadiest cast of characters around him. Rakowski was on drugs all the time, Takot said, contradicting what he told me on the phone. He said that Rakowski had sold MDA, but only to close friends. I didn't take Takot out again, but I kept calling and visiting him. I found him evasive or senile or a little of both, and the more I asked around about him, the more he seemed to vanish in the mist of the 60s. Some people told me with certainty that Takot had been an assassin for the CIA, and he was a gun freak and an incredible marksman. In his 2006 autobiography, Since Then How I Survived Everything and Lived to Tell About It, the musician David Crosby identified Takot as a soldier of fortune who taught him how to shoot a gun. Others said that he was an ex Marine who served in Korea and used to show off his impressive knife throwing skills. I heard that he grew up in Arizona, that he was a child ammer, that he was a coke smuggler, that he was an unaccredited screenwriter, and that his intelligent ties were all fictitious. This is, yeah, I love it too, Goose. And the strange thing was, none of this was entirely implausible. But the only thing everyone could agree on was that Takot had been involved in a lot of schemes, and he'd been a drug dealer, and even more, a drug user. But then, as one source put it, hey man, aren't you? When I looked up, when I looked into Hank Fine, the MIS guy Takot had said had reported to, I learned that, like everything Takot said, there was at least a kernel of truth to it. Fine, who had been a movie PR man from the 1940s until his death in 1975, had been in the Office of Strategic Services, the counterintelligence agency that oversaw the MIS and evolved into the CIA after World War II. His work often seemed to combine Hollywood and spacecraft. Eddie Albert, the star of the 60s sitcom Green Acres, told me that Fine had sent him on undercover missions to Mexico during the war. From his sailboat, the actor had photographed German landing sites and military training grounds. Though I found no proof, the consensus among Fine's associate was that he'd continued working in espionage operations throughout the 60s. His only child, Shayla, told me that his public relations gig was a cover, and yes, she said, Turcotte had reported to his father. What kind of work were they doing? She never knew, except that it was classified. Whenever I saw Takah, I returned to the subject of Fine. Don't mention that name anywhere, he barked. Seeming generally disturbed, when I asked why not, he said, none of your fucking business. You're fucking with the wrong people. Or was I fucking with lowlifes who only wanted to present an illusion of importance? I really couldn't say, and when I was finally able to talk to Billy Doyle, things didn't get any clearer. Turcotte gave me Doyle's number. He's a retired old man, just like me, he said, and he might not want to talk too much. Don't push him if he doesn't. But Doyle liked an audience, just as he had in 1969. I called him often at his home in Toronto, and he talked for hours, sometimes rambling at such length that I would turn off my recorder to save tape. Just when he was trying my patience, he'd said something provocative, and I'd have to switch the recorder back on and try to get him to repeat it. He had a short temper, and when he exploded, usually out of nowhere, it could be hard to calm him down. One time, when he didn't like my line of questioning, he told me I was shooting targets at 1,000 yards yesterday, implying that I could soon be one of them. Another time, when I tried to get some specifics about Hank Fine, Doyle yelled, go in the bathroom, swallow the gun, and pull the trigger. Jeez. When he wasn't angry, he sometimes got a kick out of teasing me. He would make a major revelation, then retract it the next time we spoke. I got the sense that he sometimes trusted me enough to tell the truth, only to realize later that he shouldn't have done that. Doyle believed that Polanski and Frykowski were Polish spies, the former subverting American democracy with his decedent films. He was sure that Polanski had something to do with the killings. Ooh. It went both ways. I heard that Polanski thought Doyle had something to do with the killings. He denied that he'd ever been a drug dealer. I read in passages from the police report in which he'd confessed to, even bragged about, having vast amounts of cocaine, but even after that, he denied it to me. He wouldn't be stupid enough to carry 2 pounds of coke on a plane, he said. When I asked him about MDA, the drug that he and Wojciech had allegedly brought in large quantities, he said that he'd never even heard of it. He relented when I read him some quotes from the transcript. Okay, fine, he'd taken it. Yeah, she is. People are calling her out like left, right, and center on every single thing that she's posting, videos, anything, IG especially, and Facebook. I brought up his and Turcotte's ability alibi for the night of the murders, they'd been in Jamaica. You'll recall filming a pot movie. Doyle admitted that the movie was a ruse. He and Takot had really been doing intelligence work there. He said as part of some effort to keep Cuba out of Jamaica. Dead white men will pull your tongue out if you tell this shit, he said. You have to understand that the government doesn't want to have any exposure on the Jamaican thing. There was never a Jamaican thing. They don't want to know about it. When I asked why, he said, how the fuck do I know? I'm a Canadian citizen. I went with Charles on an adventure. I thought we were going to do a movie, but that's not what you were really there for, and you knew it. That's right. It's an exchange that illustrates how cryptic Doyle could be and how he reveled in it. I had to ask about the story behind his alleged R. He said that never happened either. Charles was spreading the R story to have fun at my expense, he explained. Even my mom and dad asked if I was Ard, and yet he betrayed the same uncertainty he'd shown to the cops so many decades ago, telling me that he had a friend take photos of him naked so he could examine his rear end. This is sick. Similarly, he told me that Corinne Calvert was dead wrong when she said that Takot had brought Manson to her house. That's a lie, he said, noting that Takot and Calvert had once dated. She will say anything to grasp at stardom. Men with badges and guns have raised these questions before, he added. Not police, FBI sitting in DC. That in itself was astonishing to me. I hadn't heard that the FBI had investigated the murders, but I would find out later that it was true. I suggested that I didn't believe him about Calvert. You're going to come to a horrible truth, he said. Be nervous that you may have discovered the truth and you won't like it. As spurious and slimy as he could be, I found him believable when he repeated that there was more murders than had been reported. Later, when I interviewed so many people that some of them had started to compare notes, he said something really impenetrable. The community has looked at this as a settled thing until you started talking to us. So Tom is ruffling feathers. What community? I asked. Who? The ties that bind. Eventually, Doyle became convinced that I was Roman Polanski's private investigator. It was never clear to me how much he actually believed this, but it was enough to make me back away from him. I sunk a lot of hours into cultivating sources like Takot, Doyle, and the crowd surrounding them. They've been so close to the Tate murders that they were suspects, and yet they assumed no role in the mythology surrounding events of August 9th. Bugliosi, like the LAPD, had similarly acquitted them of any involvement in the killings. There were his books, classic red herring, but I still wasn't convinced. In their sleazy, run of the mill criminality, their motivations seemed much more viable than a lofty idea like helter skelter. The more I talked to them, the more I recognized certain inadequacies in Bugliosi's story, which had curtailed so many explanations in favor of the most outlandish one. Yeah, I really like this guy. At least he's speaking truths.
Even though
I
everyone tried to stop him, he still is like, okay, I'll keep going.
and he did, and so far he's done a wonderful job. Not very far in.
I know, it's really long. It's easier if
It's
it's
okay. No,
like
no, no.
on.
It's okay that it is. It's
Okay.
fine that it is. I'm actually interested in this one, whereas Helter Skelter, it was like a rush. I wanted just to get it done and over with. It's too much lawyer mumbo jumbo and the trial, and I don't know, it just got boring
The best part of this
and
book that
conceited.
I is when you get into more about Bugliosi
Yeah,
and some of the
that'll be fine.
things that he did. It's gonna blow your mind.
Yeah, something tells me
Like,
a haircut from Little Joe. Little Joe. I wanted to keep one eye open to the possibility that Jacott, Doyle, and their associates had some link to the Manson group. After all, in the family, Ed Sanders had written that it was likely that Mama Cass Elliot knew Manson through her drug connections. It seemed probable that Doyle and Jacott were pivotal there. Plus, Elliot had been friends with Rakowski and Bolger, and Elliot's bandmates were close to Polanski and Tate. In other words, everyone knew everyone else, and nobody wanted to talk about it anymore. Wow. Maybe I could suss out the connections there, but I was less enthusiastic about these supposed ties with intelligence agencies, except that I was about to get another push in that direction. Dominic Doone, the Vanity Fair journalist who had been friends with Tate Polanski and Jay Sebring, had given me a tip. Get a haircut from a man named Joe Tornova, nicknamed Little Joe. Little Joe had been 18, fresh out of a barber school, when Jay Sebring took him under his wing as an apprentice hairstylist. This was in 1961. Sebring, not yet 30, was already one of the biggest names in fashion. Having revolutionized men's grooming, he was the first to style men's hair rather than simply cut it. He patented a Sebring method through which your hair is shaped and conditioned to stay natural between visits. As promotional materials explained, and he introduced a line of hair care products. Sebring wasn't his given name. He was born Thomas Cummer and renamed himself after a racetrack in Florida he liked. You
Hmm.
didn't know that? Sebring saw his clients in a private room with only one chair. When little Joe began working for him, he was charging an unheard of $25 for a haircut. The going rate was $1.50, but his customers were happy to pay a premium, and in turn, he catered to their whims. Sebring traveled every few weeks to Las Vegas, where his clients included Frank Sinatra and several casino owners. Little Joe always went with him, and in those quiet rooms, as the scissors snipped and tufts of hair gathered on the floor, he saw the casual intimacy between Sebring and his clients, who confided in him even when Little Joe was within earshot. Now, like his mentor, to whom he referred in hushed, almost reverential tones, Little Joe was a barber to the stars. He saw his clients in a private oak-paneled room in Beverly Hills. His price was $100. Juna told me that if I bided my time and didn't press him too hard, Joe might open up about the murders. When I showed up, he seemed aware of my ulterior motive. Slight and soft spoken, he sighed and paused for nearly every sentence. Joe was convinced that Sebring's murder had to do with something more than hippies trying to ignite a race war. Sebring, he told me, had been involved with mob guys from Chicago and Las Vegas. He cut their hair, partied with them in Vegas. Then after the murders, little Joe got a call from General Charlie Barron, a casino executive and mobster, who told him, "Don't worry, little Joe, you're going to be all right." He presumed that the murders had been a drug deal gone wrong and that Jay and Frykowski had been targeted. That's more likely, if you ask me.
Well, going back to Doyle and the other guy, when he,
Yeah,
do you remember that line that was said that they didn't just deal drugs to anybody? Like they
yes,
would have to know them on like a basis. So if you take that into account, they all have to be interconnected. So if there
yeah,
was bad drugs, then somebody that brought those in would be taken out. You know what I mean?
yeah, exactly, because they all do know each other. Like, as I'm learning a
Yeah.
lot more to this story than
It's like
Bugliosi had.
one link to another link to another link. And if it goes back to the original link, then why wasn't that ever like investigated or looked into, you know?
I'd like to know that too. So he says, "Don't worry, little Joe, you're going to be all right." He presumed that the murders had been a drug deal gone wrong and that Jay and Frykowski had been targeted. That was all I got. I needed more information. I'd have to get another haircut. And the month go by, so I really needed one, and soon enough I settled into little Joe's leather chair again. Charlie Barron's call haunted him to this day. It came right after the murders. Little Joe said, before anyone had any notion of who'd committed them, "You didn't do anything to anybody," he said. Barron told him. "Nobody's going to do anything to you." The implication was that Barron and his associates were all well aware of who committed the crimes and why. But then Joe was done snipping, so I went back for a third haircut. Charlie Barron was very close to Jay Sebring, Joe told me in our third conversation. He added, "Charlie killed people." Barron was a young man during the Prohibition in Chicago. He shot two guys who were going to kill him for fixing a fight. He later went to Havana to run casinos for Meyer Lansky, another mob figure. When he returned to the United States, he was Lansky's eyes and ears at the New Sands Casino in Vegas. Barron was hardly an outlier in Sebring's shop, which was a nest of mobsters and criminals. Little Joe said, but it was Barron who scared Little Joe the most, even before his phone call. Despite Barron's known mob ties, he had some type of security intelligence clearance with the federal government. He always packed a gun. He was always close with a cabal of right wing military intelligence and Hollywood figures, many of whom had been Sebring's clients. Little Joe alleged that they did terrible things to black people and that it was Charlie who did the worst things. What the fuck?
Now see how dedicated he is? He just dropped $300 just to get that because it was $100
Well,
a
yeah,
pop to get a haircut.
Because our government, CIA, is satanic and they do. Yeah, I agree.
Oh, we're going to get into that.
I couldn't get him to elaborate on that Charlie who did the worst things, but I did ask him why, if he was following the Tate murder investigation and knew that the police had no leads. He didn't tell the cops about his call from Barron because he was too close to higher ups in law enforcement and intelligence, Joe said. He added yet another intriguing name to the list of Barron's associates, General Curtis E. LeMay, a legendary fighter pilot who'd implemented the carpet bombing of Japan during World War II. A notorious hawk, LeMay had served as Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force under President Kennedy and Johnson. In 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, he tried to organize a coup against Kennedy among the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He wanted to force the military to flout the president's orders and bomb the Soviet missile bases they'd found in Cuba. It was a lot of names to process, and the implications were dizzying. I had one question that little Joe was especially reluctant to answer. Why would Sebring, at the time, arguably the best known man and hairstylist in the world, involve himself in a crime? He had so much to lose, and clearly he was thriving. But he hadn't been. Little Joe was pained to say the deals kept falling through. He was a bad businessman. But he hadn't been. Little Joe was pained. Sorry, I just read that. Do you think he sold drugs? I asked, aware that Frykowski had possibly been doing the same. It wouldn't surprise me. Sebring's problems had multiplied throughout the 60s. He'd clashed with other barbers who wanted to unionize. In 1963, a group of hairstylists had defected en masse to start their own business. At other times, he'd had to hire bodyguards because some guys had come into the shop and roughed up several employees. Little Joe said for reasons that were never shared with him. Sebring carried a gun, and he shot someone once who came to his house and was giving his father a rough time about the door or at the door. The bottom line, Sebring, like Frykowski, had a lot more going on at the time of his murder than he had ever been revealed. Whatever it was, little Joe thought it had more to do with his death than any hippie race war motive did. Which meant that, in addition to drug dealers and Hollywood's seedier hangers on, I had to account for mobsters, ex military figures, and intelligence agents in my reporting. I was already worried about wandering into the weeds. Now I risked veering off the map entirely. Coda. Down the rabbit hole. I was writing a story about Charles Manson that had, so far, very little Manson in it. It was more about the way that events and all their messy reality boiled down to canonical fact, the way that a narrative becomes the narrative. I had to decide if stories like Little Joe's, Charlie Chicot's, and Billy Doyle's were worth looking into, and as a responsible journalist, if I was justified in dragging my magazine into it. It definitely meant asking for an extension from Premiere and risking, in the final publication, looking like a fool. No matter how you viewed them, these were conspiracy theories, but I was riveted by the stuff I turned up that countervened the Manson story as we knew it. For better or worse, it felt like there was something covered up all these years, ripe for exposure. Maybe with the passage of time, people who knew about these things might divulge them at last. I was starting to figure out that Bugliosi had sifted so many stories out of Helter Skelter to make his narrative about the conviction of the mad hippie guru and his zombie like followers easier and cleaner. If that were merely an editorial choice, so be it. But if he changed things to protect people or to shore up holes in the investigation, then I felt justified in digging deeper. It seemed impossible that a story like Little Joe's, heavy with intelligence agencies and organized crime, could coexist alongside the helter skelter motive. I knew that, in the late 60s, intelligence agencies regarded distant youth movements as the greatest threat to nations' security, and they'd marshaled their efforts accordingly. Insofar as hippies, musicians, and movie stars played a role in the movements, I could see how the broadest outline of Little Joe's story could have some truth to it. But even a hardened national security reporter would have trouble verifying his claims. And that I was not. These were the concerns I faced by the summer of 1999. The obvious answer would be keep pushing. The only problem was my deadline was fast approaching. I owed Premiere 5,000 words and I'd written 0. It's a mess.
He has
The
like
golden Penetrators. What?
It has like all these books or all these notebooks with all these notes in it, and
Yeah.
it's I can understand. I mean, 5,000 words seems like a lot, but after all this research, you imagine how much he has to compile into one story.
Well, look at the damn book.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
but
All right, chapter 3.
he's already paid
Sorry.
from them. And he's got like an advance. And at this time, you got to
Yeah.
remember, Tom was just like a freelance writer. He wasn't like had a lot of money. He was kind of like living off of his writing to support himself. So back
Yeah.
then, it was really a big deal to get this article in this magazine.
Yeah.
So he was kind of like having to weigh, do I take the magazine and just scrap the rest of it, or do I take my integrity and go with what my gut is saying that there's more to the story? So he was really gambling on his own future.
Yeah, he was. I'm glad he did, though.
Oh yeah, me too.
Chapter 3, The Golden Penetrators. Instilling Fear. Maybe I was naive to think I could discover what was going on at the Tate house in the months before the murders. People have been trying to untangle the rat's nest of rumors for 30 years, and not with a magazine deadline looming in front of them. Now I determined to my satisfaction that Bukowski Polanski had a lot to hide, that their connection to the drug trade could have put them plausibly in Manson's orbit. Beyond that, my stance of Manson's link to Hollywood was still too tenuous for my liking. And if I felt that Bugliosi's helter-skelter motive was only a high-profile continuance, I need to find the bald truth it concealed. Hoping for a better angle, I focused on one figure who was among the most perplexing in the case. Terry Melcher. Without Melcher, there could have been no murders at 10050 Cielo Drive. He was the clearest link between Manson and the Hollywood elite. A music industry bigwig, he promised Manson a record deal only to rein in on it. The official story was that Manson, reeling from the rejection, wanted to instill fear in Melcher, so he chose Melcher's old house on Cielo Drive as the site for the first night of murders. He knew that Melcher didn't live there anymore. He just wanted to give the guy a good scare. This was a vital point in the case. According to Bugliosi, Manson never went to the house the night of the murders. He just sent his followers there, told them to kill anyone they found. To convict Manson of criminal conspiracy then and get him a death sentence, Bugliosi had to establish a compelling, premeditated reason that Manson had picked the Cielo Drive home. Terry Melcher was that reason. But he didn't live there, so to me it doesn't make sense.
That didn't make sense to me either.
It doesn't, like, Melcher testified that he met Manson exactly 3 times, the last of which was around May 30th, 1969, more than 2 months before the murders. After Manson's arrest, Melcher became so frightened of the family that Bugliosi had to give him a tranquilizer to relax him before he testified.
Yeah,
10,
like
15
that's really
years.
good.
Yeah.
Always drug your witnesses before you put them on the stand.
He has no authority either. He's what, a prosecutor? He has no authority to give this guy drugs.
Exactly.
Like, what the hell? 10, 15 years after the murders, I'd speak to him, and he was still convinced that Manson's family was after him that night, Bugliosi had told me. If Manson had wanted to kill Melcher, he could have. He had Melcher's new address in Malibu. Greg Jacobson, a musician and a friend of the Beach Boys, had testified at the trial that Manson called him before the murders, asking if Melcher had a green spyglass. Yes, why? Jacobson answered. Well, he doesn't anymore, Manson said. The family had creepy crawled Melcher's Malibu home. That's what they called it, when they dressed up in black and sneaked around rich people's places and stolen the spyglass. When Melcher himself testified, he confirmed that he'd noticed it was missing around late July or early August. Candace Bergen, his girlfriend, had noted the disappearance too. See that they could have killed him. This doesn't make any sense. Over the
Oh,
years, Manson. What's right?
as we go along here, it's gonna play out so much better. But I was thinking at the time, if he was so afraid of him, why he didn't go to the police, or why, like, if he had this fear, because he already had to have this fear or this uneasy feeling around him, or knew
Yeah,
about him, the way that Bugliosi plays it in Helter Skelter. So
yeah.
at no point did he go and say, "Oh, I'm in fear for my life," until he had to testify against them.
It
Then he
almost
was
feels
in
like
fear.
Bugliosi ramped it up.
Exactly.
That's what I feel like. Over the years, Manson researchers have generally agreed that Melcher was stretching the truth. Karina Longworth, whose podcast, You Must Remember This, devoted a whole season to Manson. Who is this one? You Must Remember This. Never heard of it. She said in one episode that Melcher was vague about the details of his meetings with Manson and probably shaved a couple of visits to the ranch off the official record. It would be one thing to fudge the numbers a bit. It's easy to see why someone would want to understate the relationship with Charles Manson. But I became convinced that this was graver than that. I found proof that Melcher was quite or much closer to Manson, Tex Watson, and the girls he suggested. A year before the murders, he even lived with a member of the family at the house on Cielo Drive. There was a strong likelihood that Melcher knew immediately after the crimes that Manson was involved, but he never told the police. I found evidence that Melcher lied on the stand under oath, and Bugliosi definitely knew about it. Maybe he'd even put him up to it. Suborning witness perjury. Wow. There was a strong likelihood that Melcher knew. Oh, I just read that. Just like omissions about Polanski's sex tape and Frykowski's episode with Billy Doyle, this raised questions about Bugliosi's motives. Did he change his story to protect Melcher, a powerful record producer and the only child of one of Hollywood's most beloved stars? Had he streamlined certain events for the jury's sake, in the interest of getting an easy conviction? Or was this part of a broader pattern of deception, of bending the facts to support a narrative that was otherwise too shaky to stand? Helter Skelter, the motive, and Helter Skelter, the book, seem more illusionary by the day. Chasing the Melcher angle further imperiled any chance of hitting my deadline. It soured my relationship with Bugliosi. It brought on the first of many lawsuit threats, and it turned my fascination with the case into a full-blown obsession. But it convinced me, more than anything, that I was onto something, that the full story behind the Manson murders had never been properly told. And see, now I want to read this whole book all night because I'm just fascinated. Like, I actually believe this guy, whereas Helter Skelter,
That's what
I
I did.
always felt like a glamour magazine for Bugliosi, and he's the star. Like, it was
Well,
just
it was all me, 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 me as the
exactly.
start of the story when the actual thing should have been about the case, the murders, the people, the victims. But
Yeah,
it
he
was
took over it.
he self-grandized all of it for himself, and
He
then
did.
until even up until his death, he was still saying that he was the best prosecutor of all time, kind of
Yeah,
thing. So
his number one selling novel, and he's the best prosecutor still around, and he made
yeah,
millions, and just bragging, it's sick. Yeah, you made millions off of fucking lying to people is what you did. I lived with 17 girls. The story of Manson and Melcher starts with Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys. By the summer of 1968, Wilson, then 23, had reached an impasse. He'd become world famous as the drummer for the Beach Boys, helmed by his brothers Brian. Now the band was in decline, edged out by more subversive acts. He and his wife Carol had recently divorced for the second time. She wrote in court filings that he had a violent temper, inflicting severe bodily injury on her during his rampages. The couple had two young children, but Dennis decided to rusticate as a bachelor. He moved into a lavish Spanish-style mansion in Pacific Palisades, once a hunting lodge owned by the humorist Will Rogers. The home boasted 31 rooms and a swimming pool in the shape of California. He decorated in the spirit of the times, zebra print carpet, abundant bunk beds, and hosted decadent parties, hoping to have as much sex as possible. Okay, at least you're honest. One day, Wilson was driving his custom red Ferrari down the Pacific Coast Highway when two hitchhikers, the families Ella Jo Bailey and Patricia Kronwinkel, caught his eye. He gave them a quick lift. When he saw them again soon afterward, he picked them up a second time, taking them back to his place for milk and cookies. Okay.
cocaine and alcohol.
Yeah. History hasn't recorded what kind of cookies they enjoyed or whether those cookies were in fact sex. But whatever the case, the girls told Manson about the encounter. They weren't aware of Wilson's clout in the music industry, but Manson was, and he insisted on going back to the house with them. After a late recording session, Wilson returned to his estate to find the family's big black bus parked outside. His living room was populated with topless girls. Whatever alarm he felt was eased when their short, intense, unwashed leader, Manson, sunk to his knees and kissed Wilson's feet. The night ushered in a summer of ceaseless partying for Wilson. Manson and the family set up shop in his home, and soon Manson recruited one of the group's deadliest members, Tex Watson, who picked him up hitchhiking. The family spent their days smoking dope and listening to Charlie strum the guitar. The girls made the meals and the laundry and slept with the men on command. Manson prescribed sex 7 times a day, before and after all 3 meals, and once in the middle of the night. If it was as if we were kings just because we were men, Watson later wrote. Soon Wilson was bragging so much that he landed a headline in Record Mirror. I live with 17 girls. Oh my God, I'd be so embarrassed. Talking to Britain's Rape magazine, Wolfen offered disjointed remarks about his new friend, whom he called the Wizard. I was only frightened as a child because I didn't understand the fear, he said. Sometimes the wizard frightens me. The wizard is Charles Manson, who is a friend of mine who thinks he is God and the devil. He sings, plays, and writes poetry, and may be another artist for Brother Records, the Beach Boys label. This last bit excited Manson, who was desperate to leverage his connection with Wilson into a music career. The two co-wrote a song, Cease to Exist, whose lyrics claim that submission is a gift. Later that year, the Beach Boys recorded it at B-side, changing the title, finessing the lyrics, and dropping Manson's songwriting credit, a snub that fueled his anger toward the establishment. Manson fraternized with some of the biggest names in music. Neil Young, remembered meeting him at the girls at Wilson's place. A lot of pretty well-known musicians around LA. Manson, Young later said, though they'd probably deny it now. Among these was Terry Melcher. He and Wilson had pledged allegiance to the Golden Penetrators, a horny triumvirate that they'd formed with their friend Greg Jacobson. The Penetrators, who painted a car gold to celebrate themselves, aimed to sleep with as many women as they could. Wilson's ex-wife referred to them as roving coxmen. Obviously, then Melcher would want to move over to Wilson's house. It was full of promiscuous young women. Sometime in that summer of '68, at one of Wilson's marathon parties, he crossed paths with Manson for the first time. After another such party, Melcher rode back to Cielo Drive with Wilson, and Manson came along in the back seat. As Melcher later testified, Manson got a good look at the house from the driveway. Okay. When the end of summer came, things went south for Wilson, who'd finally grown tired of footing the bill for the endless party. Upward of $100,000 in food, clothes, and car repairs, plus gonorrhea treatments. Fuck. According to Bugliosi, Wilson was too frightened of Manson to throw him out. Instead, he simply up and left in the middle of the night, leaving the messy business of eviction to his landlord. But it must have been more complicated than that. Wilson gave 3 interviews in which he raved about Manson and the girls, and all these interviews date to the winter and summer of '69, nearly a year after he and the family had supposedly parted ways. Why would Wilson brag about his connections to a man he just schemed to escape? The only sure fact is that Manson and his group decamped to the Spawn Ranch in late August 1968. Wilson moved into a Malibu beach house with Greg Jacobson, who also recently split from his marriage. Having drifted from Wilson, his best shot at record deal, Manson knew he had to hitch his wagon to Terry Melcher's star. As his chances as fame dwindled, his mood darkened. He became obsessed with the Beatles' White Album, released the date in the late November 1968, and started to preach about the prophecies of a race war embedded in its lyrics. Things only got worse in the winter of '69 when he arranged for Melcher to come out and hear his music. Manson prepared meticulously for the prospective meeting, but Melcher stood him up. On March 23rd, a desperate Manson went searching for Melcher. Thinking he'd goad the producer into a record deal, he found his way back to the house on Cielo Drive, having remembered that Melcher lived there. Instead, Sharon Tate's personal photographer, Shakur Hadami, intercepted him. Hadami had never heard of Terry Melcher. He told Manson to go to the guest house and ask the property owner of the property, Rudolph Ottobelli, who explained curtly that Melcher no longer lived there and left a forwarding address. Manson prevailed on Greg Jacobson, still a friend and still a fan of his girls, to book another session with Melcher. This time it worked. That May, Melcher made his winding drive to the Spawn Ranch and auditioned Manson in person, visiting twice over 4 days. Manson had rounded out a dozen or so of his best songs with backup from girls singing. Performing in a gully in the woods, the girls sprawled on the ground and gazed up at their leader, who sat astride a rock with his guitar. I wasn't too impressed by the songs, Melcher would later testify. I was impressed by the whole scene, by Charlie's strength and his obvious leadership. As a courtesy, the producer complimented Manson, saying that one or two of his songs were nice. He had no intention of offering a recording contract, but he saw how the family's rustic, cultist lifestyle would lead itself to a TV documentary. Melcher suggested that he friend Mike Deasy, whose band was outfitted to make field recordings, come out to the ranch and capture another performance. Before Melcher could get out of there, a foreman at the ranch came stumbling out of a pickup truck. Drunk and belligerent, he was dressed like a cowboy, fingering a holstered gun, the same one that would later be used at the Tate murders. Manson stepped up to him and shouted, "Don't draw on me, motherfucker," socking him in the gut, taking his gun, and continuing to pummel him. It spooked Melcher. Here was a peace and love cult with naked girls roaming the old Western sets, and yet this constant threat of violence loomed over the place. It needed to be documented in all its oddity. A few days later, Melcher returned with Deasy and Jacobson, and the family repeated their audition. But what had seemed spontaneous now felt rehearsed. Deasy returned a few more times until he had a frightening LSD trip with Manson and vowed never to go back. It was all getting too toxic. Melcher conveyed his rejection through Jacobson, and that was the end of that. Manson Flat's brush with greatness was gone, and he became full-on apocalyptic. Melcher never went back to the ranch or saw anyone from the family again. Or so he says under oath anyway. After the murders, as Hollywood panicked and the LAPD chased down leads, the Golden Penetrators realized they hadn't quite washed their hands of Manson. This is where their story began to feel unbelievable to me. Manson wasn't charged with murder until late November, but Wilson, Jacobson, and Melcher had good cause to suspect him back in August, right after the killings. By then, they were frightened of Manson, and through Helter Skelter does little to indicate their terror. When I saw how much they knew and how quiet they kept, when their information would have helped police solve the case, I realized just how flimsy the Helter Skelter motive was. Its unforgettable grandiosity may have given a more prosaic truth that a few rich guys had gotten in over their heads with an unstable ex-con. First, Wilson and Jacobson knew that Manson had shot a black named Bernard Crowe about 5 weeks before the Tate murders. And Jacobson, who testified that he talked to Manson upward of 100 times, was well acquainted with his friend's bizarre race war prediction. Manson warned him that Whitney's in the affluent homes of Bel Air would be cut up and dismembered, and that the murderers would smear the victims' blood on the walls, scatter their limbs, and hang them from the ceiling. And yet, when a group of the affluent whites really was cut up and Sharon Tate was hanged from the ceiling of her home in Bel Air, Jacobson apparently didn't make the connection. Yeah, right. Nor did it occur to him in mid August when he witnessed Manson's violence firsthand. Manson broke into Jacobson's home in the middle of the night, shook him awake, and produced a bullet. "Tell Dennis there are more where this came from," he said. On the witness stand, Jacobson compared Manson that night to a caged bobcat. The electricity was almost pouring out of him. His hair was on end, his eyes were wild. A few days earlier, Manson had shown up at the Wilsons' house, too, demanding $1,500. When Wilson refused to give him the money, Manson threatened him. "Don't be surprised if you never see your kid again." After Manson's arrest, Wilson fell into a deep depression, spurring his problems with drugs and alcohol. Later, he told the Beach Boys' authorized biographer, David Leaf, "I know why Charles Manson did what he did. Someday I'll tell the world, I'll write a book and explain why he did it." He never got the chance. In 1983, 3 weeks after his 39th birthday, an acutely drunk Wilson drove from the deck of his boat into the chilly waters of Marina del Rey and accidentally drowned. Within days, a rock journalist wrote in the San Francisco Chronicle about a jarring exchange he'd had with Wilson. "Me and Charlie, we founded the family," Dennis had said, apropos of nothing. He helped Charlie make the family.
Interesting, huh?
Wow. Very. The Golden Penetrators then had an abundance of reasons to accuse Manson of the Tate LaBianca murders. Oh, I just leave off. Immediately. They believed he'd shot someone dead. He'd threatened two of them the Golden Penetrators then had an abundance of reasons to accuse Manson of the Tate LaBianca murders. Immediately. They believed he'd shot someone dead. He threatened two of them with violence. They knew he stockpiled guns and knives at the ranch, and the slaughter at Melcher's old house was exactly the kind he predicted, down to the most chilling detail. Shouldn't they have connected the dots? Was it possible that they were a conspiracy of silence among them? I'm gonna stop there for today because my throat's getting sore. Been reading for almost an hour and a half. I'm surprised I lasted that long. No, that book's interesting. I really, really, really like it. Really enjoy it. Let's see if there's pictures in here. There's gotta be. Yeah, there is. Okay, I thought so. There's a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of stuff in here. I don't know. Like these photos, I don't know who these men are. Journal of Psychedelic Drugs. Well, that's lovely.
It opens up, like, he can make like probably 4 or 5 different books on everything that gets covered in here.
Yeah.
A lot of people liked the book, but some of the critics that were just wanted to be strictly Manson didn't take into account that Manson was not just the killings, that there was so much more. So they get mad because he goes off script and goes into the CIA and the drugs and all that stuff, you know. But to me, it all
Not me.
me neither.
I'm
I
glad
liked
he
it.
did. I'm glad he did because it makes sense now. And now that I've been reading this, like I'm starting to wonder, was there even a Helter Skelter now? You know, that's what I'm starting to think. And I would have never thought that before. And again, like I've only read, geez, I'm on page 95.
I think there's
I
like
still have a lot to
800
go.
pages. I think there's like 800 pages or something.
Yeah, how much? There's 500 and, oh my gosh, how many is there?
Yeah.
521. I was thinking we should do this again tomorrow. I don't know if I want to do this or if I want to finish not fin well, attempt to finish um the documents I have from Steve McRae about Katie.
I do the Steve McRae one since that's more current.
Then Monday do this one.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I just don't want to keep leaving it because then everybody forgets. Like what the hell I was even talking about. What time is it? My God, that kid's probably gotta go home soon.
Mm.
I should go. I have to call her mother and see what 'cause she's definitely not spending the night. Not here. Not with my kid.
Well, just tag me.
Yeah, I'll message you and let you know for sure. Well, for tomorrow, you want me to just go ahead with the Steve one? Okay.
Yeah,
And then Monday, we'll do this. All right.
because
Sounds
I
like a
gotta
plan to me.
mentally prepare for my doctor's appointment on Monday, and I usually have a existential crisis and a panic attack before I go to the doctor. So
Okay, we won't do it Monday then. I'll give you another day.
No,
Until
Monday's
you just
fine.
relax.
It's just the day
Are you
before I have to go to the doctor. I can't sleep or anything. I'm just really anxious. It's just all
Yeah,
mental, but after I go to the doctor, I'll be fine, but it's just before it.
I hear you. Well, thank you for joining me. I'll let you off here. I had to go see when this child's supposed to go home.
Okay. Thank you guys.
All right, have a good night.
Bye.
All right, you guys, I'm gonna head off of here. My son's got his girlfriend over. We live in a bungalow, so they're like right there. Like, all right, you guys have a great night. I'll be back tomorrow.